is sponsored by Raycon. Joel Schumacher's 1987 pop culture classic The Lost Boys is one of the most beloved American horrors ever made, even to those not especially keen on the genre. I am ashamed to admit that until now I had never actually seen it in one complete viewing, because as someone born in the 90s and didn't start to develop specific tastes and interests until the early 2000s, I simply didn't buy fully into the hype surrounding an era I didn't belong to, regardless of how much I respect and admire its significance.
You know what it means when there's no TV? No MTV.
In the thousands of comments my channel has received over the years, I don't think there is any other horror film that has received this much passion as a pivotal encapsulation of the 80s American zeitgeist.
Pretty cool, huh?
For a fashion victim.
It tells the story of brothers Michael and Sam Emerson as they relocate with their mother Lucy to a thriving Californian beach town called Santa Carla to live with Lucy's eccentric father following her recent divorce. From there, Michael falls in love with a local girl called Star and becomes embroiled in a mysterious gang who attempt to transform Michael into a vampire, while Sam befriends two precocious vampire hunters who warn him of the impending danger that has terrorized the town for many years.
You've been eating pizza?
No, why?
Woo, you smell like garlic.
Going into it, I honestly did not know what to expect besides the broad consensus that it was a campy coming-of-age vampire flick that's visually summarized through Kiefer Sutherland's magnificent mullet and a cameo from Tina Turner's greased-up sexy saxophone guy. In fact, I've heard a lot of varying descriptions in regards to tone. On the one hand, the poster has this moody coolness indicative of a gothic John Who's Breakfast Club, while on the other hand, I've heard it's just some good old-fashioned cheesy 80s schlock. And after watching it in all its sizzling summer-ending glory, I really was surprised at how somewhat genreless it felt.
You're a vampire, Michael. My own brother, a goddamn shit-sucking vampire. Oh, you wait till Mom finds out, buddy!
I mean, yeah, sure, The Lost Boys is a vampire flick, but unlike, say, Fright Night, which came out 2 years before it, the story doesn't really dwell on being a vampire flick, as much as it does focus on the carefree precariousness of being young.
Wild kids.
Oh, they're just young. We were that age too once.
Now, as many of you know, all my 80s knowledge comes exclusively from slasher flicks and Stephen King, so I highly recommend MAVEN of the EVENTIDE's video on Lost Boys to get proper insight onto how it works as a vampire flick, because like I said in my 1408 video, there's a lot brought up in her video I never knew or considered, and it's in my ethos to avoid covering specifics I've seen in other videos, so I have left a link in the description box below. Despite all the non-stop talk about 80s nostalgia, it's essentially a timeless tale about young people making sense of a strange new place, the challenges of peer pressure and fitting in, and their partial disconnect from danger and responsibility. Conceptually, it starts out as your formulaic American teen drama. It has the quirky, suspicious nerds, the awkward romance, the dangerous bad boy and his goons, the scared little brother seeking his inner confidence, and adults who seem to be completely oblivious to everything happening around them. It's basically a satire of sorts. Like I said, it's like a John Hughes story masquerading as a vampire flick, but it never truly functions as a horror until the final third of the story. Up until then, the vampiric stuff is largely downplayed in favour of embracing the virtues and liberty of being young and wanting to stay young, without forgetting that life can be cruel and deadly, even if you don't always see it. Now, before we bite into it, I want to give a shout out to this video's sponsor Raycon, because over the last few weeks I've been in the process of moving, and I have had these bad boys in non-stop to keep me sane and focused as I run back and forth with heavy objects, renovate my office, and find some occasional downtime to cry. What I love about Raycons, besides their top audio quality, is that they're designed to be absolutely seamless and discreet, so throughout this entire chaotic process, rarely did I ever have to think about them compared to my turbulent experience with other earphones. For example, if I crashed from exhaustion, Raycon's lightweight charging case ensured I got a substantial 32 hours of battery life to use over the next few days. If I needed to stop and chat, a quick press of the earbud paused what I was playing, and thanks to the inclusion of various gel tips, my Raycons never annoyingly fell out while constantly on the move or finding myself in awkward angles while painting and decorating. In fact, it was only after I finished painting did I realize I literally chose the exact same color as my Raycons, so they really are a permanent fixture of my life now. Raycon starts at half the price of other premium audio brands without compromising on quality, and as a mark of assurance, if you're still not convinced, Raycon offer a 45-day happiness guarantee, so you have plenty of time to really put them to the test. So click the link in the description box below or go to buyraycon.com/Ryan to get 15% off your order. In some respects, The Lost Boys almost works as a bit of a cultural mood piece. Some of the best scenes are just watching the world be as it is. There's a casualness to it, something seemingly inconsequential but truthful, in how some teens go through life without outwardly expressing how messy and complicated things can truly be. What weirdly intrigued me about it was just how little technically happens in the story. The main conflict of murderous vampires killing dozens of people isn't treated with the same sense of urgency common in most adult horrors, because after all, this is a story about young characters who don't really experience the same pressures or responsibilities as adults.
I have more serious things in my mind than girls in school. There's things I'm dealing with that you can...
Things I wouldn't understand.
I've talked about it before in several videos, specifically Stephen King's It and Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street, but many kids at the time, and even today, don't feel a significant emotional attachment to the horrors of the real world. Bluntly speaking, kids think they're invincible and often do the dumbest, dangerous shit because many of them, understandably, don't have a mature concept of consequence. In fact, I'll use this reference again. As Bart Simpson once elegantly put it,
"Either of us falls in, we're doomed."
Kids don't die!
I'm not saying the experience is universal, but we can't overlook the inherent naivety of being young.
You know the rule about filling up the car with gas when you take it without asking?
No, Grandpa.
No, now you do.
Self-awareness takes a very long time and a lot of life experience to develop, so seeing these kids continue to enjoy their lives despite how fiercely dangerous Santa Carla is speaks to that generation and beyond. As covered in many slasher flicks of the 70s and 80s, Stranger Danger was the rampant moral panic of the time, as the media gave mass attention to missing person cases and serial killers, yet these fears came predominantly from adults and authority figures, as opposed to kids who were more preoccupied with their own innocence.
You drank someone's blood? Are you crazy?
Put it this way, the first thing the Emerson brothers smell when they arrive is death, yet it's quickly overshadowed once they're immersed in the overwhelming stench of teen spirit. Yet the film continues to place considerable attention on the distressing number of missing person posters littered around town, just to remind you that no, we are not safe. This town has a very dire and ghoulish problem that seems to have gone invisible. For young people, the proverbial carousel keeps on turning, the carefree vibes live on, and the party doesn't stop. All the scary, serious adult stuff is just background noise to them, because it's something they think will never happen to them, even though it's right in their face all the time, warning them of how uncertain their fate may be if they don't tread carefully. However, that's not to condescendingly assume that all kids are clueless, because while we see the older brother Michael become entranced in this hypnotic energy and go with the flow of his hormonal lust, his younger brother Sam does show immediate awareness to the dangers they're falling into.
Piss off. No, all you do is give attitude lately. You watching too much Dynasty, bud?
Hell, when we talk about youth and maturity, great attention is placed on Sam's two new friends, brothers Edgar and Alan, as they basically run around acting like adults while their stoned out hippie parents blend innocuously into the background. They manage their parents' comic book store, they put on deep brooding voices to sound older, which admittedly I did as a kid, and of course they run a professional vampire hunting service.
We're dedicated to a higher purpose. We're fighters for truth, justice, and the American way.
Yet, when you take their precociousness and look at what they do from a distance, Edgar and Alan are still ultimately just kids putting themselves in danger because, again, they think they're invincible. I love how that innocence actually works in their favour. It's not only the main joke of their characters, but it is perfectly accurate how their competence is totally accidental. They initially reject fear because they've never truly faced it before. They're just normal kids with overactive imaginations inspired by the personas of their pop culture heroes, and so it is painfully honest how in over their heads they get.
Did you know that?
Of course. Everyone knows that.
I can sit here and call them immature kids, but you can't deny how their behaviour feels absolutely honest, because I remember having that same innocence when I thought I could take on the world.
How much you think we should charge him for this?
That's why this whole idea of staying forever young adds a conflicting poignancy that's better experienced than explained, hence why I consider The Lost Boys a cultural mood piece of sorts. Yes, it is uplifting and comforting to see these people enjoy their lives in the face of adversary, yet romanticizing being forever young feels like a purgatory that the Lost Boys are trapped in. The gang of vampires are basically just kids left to their own devices, and like everyone else, they're moving through life on autopilot and without certainty. Hell, it's actually worse for them because they're moving through death without certainty. To them, eternal youth is both a blessing and a curse. They can do whatever they want without consequence, but the world continues to move on without them. Think about the symbolism behind it. They live in this 80-year abandoned former teen hotspot as if to retain some resemblance of their youth, as they're ostracized from the current world because of their deviance. They're seemingly rebels without a cause. They sell Michael on this idea that they are the true lost spirit of eternal youth, but in actuality, they're the ones bleeding society's innocence and rebelling against a world that's already changed and forgotten them, that is, if the world even knew about them to begin with. It's all conveyed in the opening shots. Individualism is thriving, tradition is dead, long live being strange, which is literally accompanied by a song called People Are Strange by the Doors, covered by Echo and the Bunnymen. It's a prominent theme echoed through time, but in the context of horror, it does linger on notions established in A Nightmare on Elm Street, which released 3 years before it. A Nightmare on Elm Street was one of the first horrors to truly tackle the mortality and uncertainty of youth in an original way, where death is this impending shadow constantly watching over them that's not exclusive to adults. In the 80s, death more or less became symbolic to carefree teenage promiscuous behaviour. Sex became an act that pretty much guaranteed death, hence why we have a long-standing tradition of the final girl typically being a virgin. To the young, sex was taboo, ritual-esque even, especially in religiously conservative settings where sex meant you basically handed your virginity over to Satan because it signaled not only the end to your innocence, but your childhood forever.
Looks like I wasn't the only one got lucky last night, huh?
While The Lost Boys doesn't deal with sex as an explicit theme, the essence of it still drives Michael's end of the story, both in his lust for Star and a lifestyle he wishes to connect to.
Drink some of this, Michael. Be one of us.
In the grand scheme of things, The Lost Boys focuses on that phase of transition where life truly begins to feel like a real scary place where you can't just run and hide or depend on your parents to save you from every danger. When we finally see how barbaric The Lost Boys really are, it confronts us with the true horror we've anticipated from the opening. We are finally made to face the fears that have eluded the characters to this point, and very quickly, things come crashing down. However, here is that major spoiler warning for those who still wish to see the film for themselves. Admittedly, the climax does feel a little out of left field because it's more akin to Fright Night than just staying true to its own thing. Granted, that doesn't take away from it still being a fun and gratifying payoff to see these vampires get their asses kicked in a way that reflects their overzealous belief that they're invincible.
You miss, sucker!
They come in incredibly cocky and are almost immediately caught off guard by how easily defeated they are. In some respects, it does seem a bit anticlimactic, but it does reinforce the fallacy of youth, this idea that they are impenetrable to death, especially considering as vampires they sit in this purgatory between life and death. The big reveal is that the Lost Boys have a father called Max who had the leader David attempt to transform the Emerson brothers so that their mother Lucy would accept becoming their new vampiric mother. When you really dig into it, it makes a whole lot of sense and rounds off the general themes of the story. These pesky, violent rebels need an innocent, sensitive role model to give them guidance and perhaps bring back that missing sense of harmony that's been lost. The thing is, the Lost Boys is remarkably ambiguous about almost everything, so it is open to mass interpretation as to whether it truly is as simple as vampires wanting to grow and strengthen their family, or find eternal peace in a place that's been basically labelled as a cesspit of death.
If all the corpses buried around here was to stand up all at once, we'd have one hell of a population problem.
Regardless of the ultimate motive, The Lost Boys is a profound embodiment of the era in which it was made. It is beautifully and viscerally sentimental. It almost asks you to just close your eyes, take in the moment, and go with the flow like its characters. Danger and death are inescapable, but that doesn't mean that you have to let fear control your life. It's visually poetic, drifting between poignant, funny, disturbing, and heartfelt, with the use of thoughtful music choices, a diverse mise-en-scene, and atmospheric changes, choosing to instead explore its story in a haphazard way that symbolizes the very youth it speaks to.